You look in the mirror and something feels wrong. Not your reflection, that's the same face you've always had. But behind the eyes, there's someone you don't recognize anymore. You move through your days with perfect precision, saying the right things, laughing at the right moments, performing your life with such flawless execution that nobody notices. Nobody sees that you've become a stranger to yourself, that the person operating your body is running on autopilot while the real you-ever that was has quietly disappeared. And here's the most disturbing part. You can't remember exactly when it happened. There was no dramatic moment, no clean break. You just woke up one day and realized you'd been gone for a while. You panic quietly. Late at night, you scroll through old photos trying to find the moment you lost yourself. You analyze your own behavior, like a detective searching for clues. You ask yourself the question that keeps you awake: who am I now, and where did I go? You feel like an imposter in your own life, watching yourself make decisions that don't feel like yours, having conversations that sound hollow, pursuing goals that suddenly seem meaningless. And the worst part, everyone else seems convinced. Your performance is so good that nobody questions it. They see continuity where you see rupture. They see you where you see absence. But what if I told you that this terrifying sense of self-estrangement isn't a breakdown, it's a breakthrough? What if the person you think you've lost never actually existed in the first place? What if what you're experiencing right now is the first genuine moment of your life, and everything before was the real performance? Let me take you somewhere uncomfortable. For most of your existence, you've been operating under a fundamental illusion, the belief that you have a fixed, solid self, a core identity that remains constant across time. You've spent decades building and defending this fictional character, creating a coherent narrative about who you are based on your past, your preferences, your personality traits, your beliefs. You've collected evidence for this self, like building a case. I'm the kind of person who loves travel. I'm an introvert. I value authenticity. I'm ambitious. You've constructed an entire mythology of identity, and you've believed it so thoroughly that you've never questioned whether any of it was real. This is what the philosopher Martin Heidegger called das Man, the they self. Not your authentic being, but a socially constructed performance designed to fit you into the world. You became who others expected you to be, who your parents needed you to be, who society rewarded you for being, who your own fear of rejection demanded you become. Layer by layer, year by year, you built this elaborate costume of selfhood and wore it so long you forgot it was a costume at all. You mistook the mask for the face. And here's what nobody tells you. This process was necessary. You needed this false self to survive. As a child, you couldn't afford to be your authentic being, whatever that means. You needed approval, protection, belonging. So you learned to read the room, to calibrate your behavior, to become who the situation demanded. You learned that certain expressions of yourself were rewarded, while others were punished. Slowly, methodically, you pruned away everything that didn't fit, until what remained was a perfectly socialized, maximally acceptable version of personhood. This wasn't conscious. This wasn't malicious. This was survival. Heidegger understood something profound about human existence. We are thrown into a world not of our choosing, and our first response is to flee from the anxiety of our own freedom into the safety of conformity. We adopt the values, beliefs, and behaviors of the they, the anonymous collective consciousness of society. We think their thoughts, we want their wants, we fear their fears. And we do this so completely that we convince ourselves these borrowed desires are authentically ours. Think of it like this. Imagine you're an actor who's been playing the same role for so long that you've forgotten you're acting. The character has a full biography, consistent traits, recognizable patterns. Other actors know their lines and respond predictably. The audience believes completely in the performance. And then one day, mid-scene, you suddenly remember, this isn't you, this is a script. These aren't your words, this isn't your story. But everyone around you is still in character, still playing their parts, still expecting you to deliver your next line. And you realize with creeping horror that you don't remember who you were before the play began. This is what happened to you. If this is resonating with something deep in your chest, something you haven't been able to name until now, maybe it's time to subscribe. We're excavating these depths every single week, and you're already here in the dark with us anyway. Now, most people respond to this recognition in the worst possible way. They panic and try to reconstruct the self they think they've lost. They become desperate archaeologists of their own identity, digging through memories and old journals, trying to recover some authentic core that was buried. They ask everyone who's known them, who was I, what was I like before? They pursue self-discovery like it's a treasure hunt, convinced that somewhere inside them is the real self waiting to be found. But here's the devastating truth. There is no buried treasure. There is no authentic core self waiting to be excavated. The person you're trying to recover never existed except as another performance. Another mask you wore so early you can't remember putting it on. You're searching for an origin point that isn't there. Childhood wasn't your true self, it was just an earlier version of the costume, before you learned to tailor it more precisely. This sends people into increasingly frantic attempts at self-recovery. They travel alone, seeking themselves in foreign landscapes. They journal obsessively, trying to capture their authentic thoughts. They meditate, they take psychedelics, they go to therapy, they read philosophy, they quit their jobs. They leave their relationships all in pursuit of the self they believe they've lost. And with each attempt, the sense of self-estrangement only deepens. Because they're still operating under the fundamental misunderstanding. They think selfhood is something to be found, rather than something that never existed in the first place. The search becomes its own trap. Every attempt to grasp your true self pushes it further away, like trying to catch your own shadow. You become hypervigilant, constantly monitoring yourself for signs of authenticity or inauthenticity. Is this desire really mine, or did I learn it from someone else? Am I choosing this, or am I conforming? The analysis itself becomes another performance. Another layer of self-consciousness that distances you even further from any possibility of genuine experience. This is the paradox that Heidegger identified. The more you seek your authentic self, the more inauthentic you become. The very act of trying to pin down who you are transforms you into an object of your own observation, splitting you into observer and observed, creating the very alienation you're trying to escape. Let me introduce you to what I call ontological nakedness. Not the discovery of your true self, but the recognition that there is no true self to discover. That beneath all the masks, there is no face, just the raw, formless capacity for being that precedes and exceeds any fixed identity. This isn't nihilism. This isn't saying you don't exist. It's saying you exist in a radically different way than you've been taught to believe. You are not a thing. You are not a fixed entity with stable properties. You are a process, a verb, disguised as a noun. A continuous event of becoming that Western language forces us to speak about as if it were a static object. What you call yourself is actually a pattern of habits, a constellation of learned responses, a collection of stories you've told so many times they calcified into seemingly solid facts, but none of it has the substance you've attributed to it. It's all fluid, contingent, constructed moment by moment through your engagement with the world. Ontological nakedness is the direct experience of this fluidity. It's what remains when you stop performing selfhood, stop defending your identity, stop trying to maintain narrative continuity with your past. It feels like dissolution because something is dissolving the fictional character you've been playing. But what's being revealed isn't another, truer character beneath it. It's the absence of any character at all. It's the spacious, undefined, infinitely potential being that you actually are. This state has specific characteristics that distinguish it from the desperate self-searching I described earlier. First, there's an absence of self-reference. You're not thinking about yourself, analyzing yourself, trying to figure yourself out. You're simply here, engaged with what's in front of you. Without the meta layer of self-consciousness that usually narrates and evaluates everything. Second, there's a strange kind of freedom, not freedom to choose who you are, but freedom from the burden of being anyone at all. You can respond authentically to each moment because there's no fixed identity to protect or maintain. Third, and most paradoxically, other people often perceive you as more yourself during these moments, even though you've never felt less like a fixed self. They say things like, "You seem really present," or "I feel like I'm actually seeing you for the first time." What they're responding to is the absence of performance, the dropping of the mask. But what you're experiencing isn't the revelation of a true face beneath the mask, it's the recognition that there was never a face to begin with. Heidegger called this authentic existence being toward death, not morbid fixation on mortality, but living with full awareness of your own finitude and the groundlessness of your being. When you truly grasp that you will die, that your existence has no inherent meaning or purpose beyond what you create, that there is no cosmic script guaranteeing who you should be, the entire structure of the false self begins to collapse. And in that collapse, there's a strange liberation. If you're still here, if this is landing in that specific way that tells you it's not just intellectual, maybe it's time to stay. Subscribe if you want to keep excavating these territories where most people refuse to look. Now, I must warn you about something that might make you want to dismiss everything I've just said. Ontological nakedness sounds deeply unappealing to the part of you that spent your entire life building and defending an identity. It sounds like annihilation, like becoming nobody, having no preferences, no personality, no distinctive characteristics. It sounds, in a word, boring. And you might be thinking, why would I want to experience this formless, undefined state when I could work on becoming a better, more authentic version of myself? This objection is completely understandable, and I want to validate it directly. The prospect of giving up your sense of fixed identity is terrifying because identity has been your primary coping mechanism for dealing with the anxiety of existence. It's what makes you feel real, significant, continuous across time. The thought of losing it feels like death, because it is a kind of death. The death of the character you've been playing. But here's what you need to understand. Maintaining the illusion of fixed selfhood has a cost you've been paying your entire life without realizing it. Every moment you spend defending and performing your identity is a moment you're not actually living. Every time you make a decision based on who you are, rather than what the situation genuinely calls for, you're choosing rigidity over responsiveness. Every time you reject an experience or opportunity because that's not me, you're narrowing the scope of your existence in service of a fictional character's consistency. The exhaustion you feel, the sense of being trapped in your own life, the feeling that you're watching yourself from the outside, these aren't symptoms of losing yourself. They're symptoms of finally seeing through the performance and recognizing its cost. The person you think you've lost was a prison you built so skillfully that you mistook it for home. Let me tell you about someone I knew who embodied this perfectly. Michael was a successful architect, mid-40s, with a carefully curated life that looked extraordinary from the outside. He had a clear identity, the creative professional who valued design, aesthetics, meaningful work. He knew his preferences intimately, what restaurants he liked, what music moved him, what constitutes good architecture. He could describe himself with remarkable precision, and his self-description matched how others perceived him perfectly. He was, by all measures, someone who knew exactly who he was. Then his father died. Not suddenly, but slowly, from cancer. Michael spent 6 months watching this man who had been so solid, so unchanging, so definitively himself, gradually disappear. And in those final weeks, something strange happened. His father, medicated and close to death, seemed to forget who he was supposed to be. The stern patriarch dissolved. The man who never showed emotion wept freely. The person who had such fixed opinions seemed suddenly open, even playful. And Michael realized his father had been performing too, right until the moment the performance became impossible to maintain. After the funeral, Michael went back to his life. But something had shifted. He would catch himself in the middle of expressing an opinion about design and think, do I actually believe this? Or is this just what Michael the architect is supposed to say? He'd be having dinner at his favorite restaurant and realize he wasn't actually enjoying it. He was enjoying the idea that someone like him would enjoy a place like this. Every gesture, every preference, every seemingly authentic choice began to feel hollow, like he was following a script he'd written so long ago he'd forgotten he was the author. Most people would panic here and try to find their real preferences. But Michael did something different. He stopped trying to figure out who he really was. He just started noticing when he was performing and when he wasn't. And slowly, carefully, he began making choices without consulting his identity. He'd go to movies he shouldn't like, have conversations where he didn't know his position in advance, take on projects that didn't fit his brand. And here's what he discovered. When he stopped being Michael the architect, he didn't become nobody. He became more responsive, more alive, more genuinely present than he'd ever been while defending his identity. Other people noticed it too. His work got more interesting because he wasn't constraining it to fit his established aesthetic. His relationships deepened because he wasn't performing a role in them. He had less certainty about who he was, but more direct contact with what was actually happening in each moment. The transformation wasn't dramatic. There was no moment of enlightenment. He just gradually learned to live with the discomfort of not knowing who he was, and in that discomfort, he found a strange kind of freedom. Not freedom to be anyone he wanted, but freedom from the burden of being anyone at all. This is what you're in the middle of right now. The person you think you've lost, the one with clear boundaries, consistent traits, a coherent narrative. That person was always a performance. What's happening to you isn't loss of self. It's the first crack in the performance, the first moment you're seeing through the illusion. And it feels like dying because something is dying, the character is dying, the mask is cracking. The false self that kept you safe is revealing itself as false. This is not a mistake, this is not pathology, this is awakening. And it's supposed to feel exactly this disorienting. Think about metamorphosis, the process a caterpillar undergoes to become a butterfly. Inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar doesn't simply grow wings, it completely liquefies. Its entire structure breaks down into undifferentiated cellular soup. If the caterpillar had consciousness during this process, it would experience it as absolute dissolution, total annihilation. There would be no moment where it thinks, ah yes, I'm becoming a butterfly. There would only be the terrifying sensation of everything it knew itself to be disintegrating into formless chaos. But this dissolution isn't failure. It's the necessary precondition for transformation. The caterpillar's form has to completely break down before the butterfly's form can emerge. There's no way to skip the liquefaction, no way to transition smoothly from one form to another. You have to become nothing before you can become something new. This is where you are right now. In the liquefaction stage, everything you knew yourself to be is breaking down, and you can't see yet what's emerging because it hasn't formed yet. You're in the space between stories, between identities, between the character you've been playing and the recognition that there is no character, and your entire being is screaming that this is wrong, that you need to fix it, that you need to reconstruct the self you've lost. But you can't reconstruct what was never real in the first place. You can only allow the dissolution to complete itself. You can only learn to inhabit this formless space without panicking, without rushing to solidify into a new identity just to escape the discomfort of being undefined. This is the most important thing I can tell you. The discomfort you're feeling isn't a problem to be solved. It's the process itself. The anxiety, the sense of unreality, the feeling of watching yourself from the outside, these are what it feels like to wake up from the dream of fixed selfhood. This is what freedom feels like before your mind learns to recognize it as freedom rather than threat. So, here's what you do want. I want to be very clear that this isn't a technique to recover your lost self or to build a better self. This is how you learn to exist without needing to be anyone at all. First, stop asking, who am I? Stop searching for your authentic self, your core identity, your true nature. Every time you notice yourself trying to figure out who you really are, recognize it as the false self, trying to reconstruct itself. The question, who am I, presupposes that you are a who, a fixed entity with discoverable properties, but you're not. You're a process, an event, a verb. The question itself keeps you trapped in the illusion. Second, start noticing when you're performing. Not to stop performing. That's impossible and not even desirable, but just to see it clearly. Notice when you choose something because that's what someone like me would choose. Notice when you express an opinion because it's consistent with your established position rather than because it's what you genuinely think in this moment. Notice when you're maintaining character continuity at the expense of authentic response. Just notice, without judgment, without trying to fix it. If this process is speaking to something you've been unable to articulate, something that's been haunting the edges of your awareness, hit subscribe. We're not going anywhere, and neither are you, but at least we can stay in this uncomfortable space together. Third, practice making small decisions without consulting your identity. When you're choosing what to eat, what to watch, how to spend your evening, don't ask, what would I enjoy? Ask, what does this moment call for? Choose based on present circumstances rather than established preferences. See what happens when you stop letting your past determine your present. Fourth, allow yourself to contradict yourself. Hold opposing views simultaneously. Express different opinions in different contexts. Be inconsistent. The need for consistency is one of the primary mechanisms that keeps the false self in place. You think you need to be the same person across all contexts, but this is fiction. Different situations call for different responses, and the insistence on remaining consistent prevents you from responding authentically to what's actually in front of you. Fifth, stop performing. Stop prefacing things with, "I'm the kind of person who," or "I've always been," or "I never." These phrases are how you maintain the illusion of fixed identity. They're how you trick yourself into believing the character is real. When you catch yourself using this language, just notice it. Notice how it solidifies you, how it narrows your options, how it keeps you in character. Sixth, and most importantly, learn to tolerate not knowing who you are. Sit with the discomfort of being undefined. When someone asks you about yourself and you feel the urge to deliver your familiar self-description, pause. Feel the anxiety of not having a ready answer. Notice the impulse to fill the space with a coherent narrative. And, sometimes not always, but sometimes resist that impulse. Say "I don't know" and mean it. What you'll discover, gradually and without drama, is that not knowing who you are doesn't make you nobody. It makes you available. Available to respond authentically to what's in front of you, rather than defaulting to habitual patterns. Available to experience things freshly rather than through the filter of established preferences. Available to change, to grow, to become different from moment to moment without needing to maintain some fictional continuity. And here's the paradox. The less you know about who you are, the more yourself you become. Not because you've discovered your true self, but because you've stopped being anyone at all. You've stopped performing. You've dropped the mask and realized there was nothing beneath it except this spacious, undefined capacity for being that you actually are. Now, what do you absolutely need to stop doing? Stop reading self-help books about finding yourself. Stop taking personality tests to discover your type. Stop journaling to figure out who you really are. Stop asking friends and family to tell you what you're like. Stop analyzing your childhood to locate the origin of your authentic self. Every one of these activities reinforces the illusion that there's a discoverable, fixed self waiting to be found. They keep you in the prison while making you believe you're working toward freedom. Stop comparing your current self to your past self to measure how much you've changed or stayed the same. Stop trying to maintain consistency with who you used to be. Stop making decisions based on, "I've always been this way," or "that's not like me." These phrases are the bars of your cell, and you're the one installing them. Stop seeking validation from others about your identity. Stop asking, "Do you think I'm X?" or "Would you say I'm Y?" Every time you seek external confirmation of your identity, you're outsourcing your being to other people's perceptions, which is exactly how you built the false self in the first place. You became who others needed you to be, and now you're asking them to tell you who you are. Can you see the trap? And most crucially, stop trying to replace the old identity with a new, better, more authentic one. This is the most seductive trap of all. Your mind will want to take everything I've said and use it to construct a new identity, the person who's transcended identity, the enlightened one who lives without a fixed self. This is just another performance, another mask, another character. The point isn't to become someone who lives authentically. The point is to stop being someone altogether. Here's the final paradox, the one that will make your mind twist itself into knots. You can't effort your way into ontological nakedness. The more you try to achieve it, the more you solidify the very self you're trying to dissolve. This isn't a state you attain through practice or discipline. It's what naturally emerges when you stop doing all the things that create and maintain the illusion of fixed selfhood. It's what's already here, right now, underneath your constant attempts to be someone. The false self survives through effort, the continuous effort of performance, maintenance, defense. Ontological nakedness requires the opposite, the courage to stop efforting, to let the performance fail, to allow the character to fall away. And this is terrifying because it feels like death. But it's only the death of what was never alive in the first place. The fictional character you've been animating through sheer force of habit. You've been asking, "Who am I?" as if it's a question with an answer, a puzzle to be solved. But what if it's the wrong question entirely? What if the real question is, what happens when I stop trying to be anyone at all? What remains when the performance ends? What am I before I become someone? I can tell you the answer, but you won't believe me until you experience it directly. What remains is this. Just this, the pure fact of being here, aware, responsive, alive, no story, no character, no identity required, just the raw, immediate, undeniable presence of existence itself. And it turns out that this has always been enough. It was enough before you learned to be someone. It's enough now. It will be enough after every identity you construct inevitably dissolves. The person you think you've lost wasn't real. The person you're trying to become isn't necessary. What you actually are, this undefined, ungraspable, infinitely flexible capacity for being, was never lost and can never be found. It's what you are before you decide who to be. It's what remains when you stop deciding altogether. You've spent your entire life building and defending a self, believing this was necessary, believing this was you. And now that structure is cracking, revealing itself as the elaborate fiction it always was. This isn't tragedy, this isn't loss. This is the first real moment of your existence. The first time you're experiencing life without the filter of a performed identity mediating everything. Like this video, if you found something true in it. Leave a comment if this articulated something you've been feeling but couldn't name. And subscribe if you're ready to stay in this space where we don't offer easy answers or comfortable stories. Where we just keep looking at what's actually true, no matter how unsettling it gets. You don't need to find yourself. You don't need to become yourself. You don't need to fix whatever you think is broken. You just need to stop performing long enough to notice what's always been here, hiding in plain sight, underneath every character you've ever played. The space between thoughts, the gap between one moment and the next, the awareness that witnesses all experience without being any particular experience, the formless presence that you are before you solidify into someone. This is ontological nakedness. Not the discovery of who you really are, but the recognition that who you are was always a question with no answer, a problem with no solution, a search with no destination. Because you were never a who to begin with, you were always this undefined, uncontained, infinitely present, eternally free of the burden of being anyone at all. And here's the most extraordinary thing. Everyone around you can sense it when you stop performing. They can feel the difference between interacting with a defended identity and encountering someone who's not trying to be anyone. They might not have words for it, but they know. They relax. They drop their own performance slightly. They feel permission to be less fixed themselves. Your liberation becomes contagious, not because you're modeling a new way of being, but because you've stopped modeling altogether. So, look in the mirror again. See that face you don't recognize? And instead of asking, who is that? Instead of trying to recover the familiar character or construct a new one, just see, just notice. Just allow the recognition that you've never been anyone at all and that this was always okay, more than okay. This was always the point. You are not lost. You were never found. You are not finding yourself. You are losing yourself. And in that loss, in that dissolution, in that absolute surrender of the need to be someone, there is more freedom than you've ever known. Because the person you think you are is the prison. And the bars were always made of nothing but your own stories, maintained through nothing but your continued belief. The character is dying. Let it die. What remains is what you've always been. This open, undefined, infinitely responsive presence that needs no identity to exist, no story to be valid, no character to be real. This is enough. This has always been enough. This will always be enough. You are already free. You just haven't stopped performing long enough to notice.